right, we're going to dismiss the children to Children's Church now. So if you're one of the Children's Church volunteers, please stand up and the children will make their way on over to you. I think that's Miss, I'm not sure who that is. Oh, right over there. All right. Okay, so I don't feel like I'm really here. I don't feel like I got enough sleep. Just bear with me. I'm going to try to I see letters, but I'm not sure if they're going to form words, so please just bear with me. I'd also like to point out that Hawaii also doesn't observe daylight savings time, so it's weird how Ryan said he didn't want to move there, though. I don't know what that's about. All right, so we're going to turn to Acts chapter 24, verses 1 through 27. That's Acts 24, 1 through 27. Paul says, 5 days later, the high priest Ananias went down to Caesarea with some of the elders and a lawyer named Tertullus, and they brought their charges against Paul before the governor. When Paul was called in, Tertullus presented his case before Felix. We have enjoyed a long period of peace under you, and your foresight has brought about reforms in this nation. Everywhere and in every way, most excellent Felix, we acknowledge this with profound gratitude. But in order not to weary you further, I would request that you be kind enough to hear us briefly. We have found this man to be a troublemaker, stirring up riots among the Jews all over the world. He is a ringleader of the Nazarene sect and even tried to desecrate the temple, so we seized him. By examining him yourself, you will be able to learn the truth about all these charges we are bringing against him. The other Jews joined in the accusation, asserting that these things were true. When the governor motioned for him to speak, Paul replied, I know that for a number of years you have been a judge over this nation, so I gladly make my defense. You can easily verify that no more than 12 days ago I went up to Jerusalem to worship. My accusers did not find me arguing with anyone at the temple or stirring up a crowd in the synagogues or anywhere else in the city, and they cannot prove to you the charges they are now making against me. However, I admit that I worship the God of our ancestors as a follower of the way, which they call a sect. I believe everything that is in accordance with the law and that is written in the prophets, and I have the same hope in God as these men themselves have, that there will be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked. So I strive always to keep my conscience clear before God and man. After an absence of several years, I came to Jerusalem to bring my people gifts for the poor and to present offerings. I was ceremonially clean when they found me in the temple courts doing this. There was no crowd with me, nor was I involved in any disturbance. But there are some Jews from the province of Asia who ought to be here before you and bring charges if they have anything against me. Or these who are here should state what crime they found in me when I stood before the Sanhedrin, unless it was this one thing I shouted as I stood in their presence. It is concerning the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you today. Then Felix, who was well acquainted with the way, adjourned the proceedings. When Lysias the commander comes, he said, I will decide your case. He ordered the centurion to keep Paul under guard, but to give him some freedom and permit his friends to take care of his needs. Several days later, Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish. He sent for Paul and listened to him as he spoke about faith in Christ Jesus. As Paul talked about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and said, That's enough for now. You may leave. When I find it convenient, I will send for you. At the same time, he was hoping that Paul would offer him a bribe, so he sent for him frequently and talked with him. When 2 years had passed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, but because Felix wanted to grant a favor to the Jews, he left Paul in prison. This is the word of the Lord.
Thank you, Elise. Well, if I can get a quick show of hands, did anybody ever have a teacher who absolutely hated you back in school? Okay, a lot of hands this morning. Yeah, the opening questions in these sermons are always so uplifting and positive, right? But anybody ever have a teacher that absolutely could not stand you? Like a teacher who seemed like they had it out for you. Maybe even a teacher who went as far as making up new rules just to punish you. Making up stories just to get you in trouble. Who seemed to go out of their way to change the rules, move the line, pull the ladder just a little bit higher and just a little bit higher and just a little bit higher so that no matter what you did, you somehow always ended up getting in trouble. Anybody have one like that? I had a handful of those. There's a lot of stories we could tell, but the worst case of teacher problems I ever had was actually not with one of my regular teachers. It was with a substitute whose name I don't even remember. Here's the story. I was in second grade, so I was 8 because I was just a little bit older than most of the other kids throughout school. I was a second grader. I was 8 years old. And what happened was that in the middle of my second grade year, my second grade teacher got sick, and so she had to be out of work in bed for a couple of weeks while she recovered, and for that couple of weeks, we had a string of substitutes. So I was stoked, because most substitutes are cool, right? Generally speaking, substitute teachers are cool. Like regular teachers are always like, open up your book, turn to page 52, and do the 20 math problems that are on the page. But substitute teachers are like, hey, I brought this picture of a pumpkin. You guys are going to color it. So I always loved substitutes back in the day, and during those 2 weeks, as far as I remember, I loved most of those substitutes, but there was one, and for some reason this one just had it out for me. I don't know if I did something that brought it on. Probably I did something that brought it on, but I don't know what the deal was, but this substitute just had it out for little second grade Ryan the moment she arrived. And so every single day that she was subbing, I got in trouble for something, but not the kind of things I usually got in trouble for. Case in point, I remember one day I raised my hand and she yelled at me because she said I raised my hand too aggressively. I don't know what that means. It's like punching somebody on the way up as you raise your hand. I definitely didn't do that. But another day, we had to do a written assignment. And it was like we watched a video about some like special giraffe or something like that. I don't know if it was like an endangered form of giraffe or what, but we watched a video about a giraffe and we had to do a written assignment on it. And so I wrote it. I turned it in, and then she yelled at me in front of the class because she said that my written assignment was disrespectful. How do you disrespect a giraffe? But the ultimate incident was the last day she ever subbed, and on the last day she ever subbed for us, midway through the day, we were getting ready to go to lunch. As we were getting ready to go to lunch, everybody was getting their lunch boxes and all the food and all that. And so I pulled out my lunch box and I started to put my things in it. And I was getting ready to head over to the door when suddenly I saw the figure of the substitute storming me. She was like charging at me like she was a defensive tackle and I had the football. And before I knew it, she was right in front of me and she grabbed my arm and lifted me all the way up off the ground because second graders are not difficult to lift all the way up off the ground. And she said, "That is the last straw, Ryan." And I didn't actually know what that saying meant. I was like, what? What about straws? What? But without saying anything to the rest of the class, she just dragged me out of the classroom and all the way down to the hall and to the principal's office. She dragged me into the front office and slammed me down on this chair and went up to the front desk and said, "I need to see the principal." The front desk lady was like, "What's going on?" And the substitute teacher said, "This student just flipped off another kid in class." Now in second grade, I didn't even know what the term flipped off meant. It had never occurred to me that like my middle finger might in some way be a special finger. Because let's be straight, that's a weird idea, right? Sometime hundreds of years ago, somebody was like, hey, one of your 5 fingers is a bad one. Don't point it at people, right? That never occurred to me as a second grader, right? So I didn't even know what the term flipped off meant as an 8-year-old. I thought she was saying that I flipped the student's chair over or that I pushed somebody down or something like that. And so I immediately stood up and said, hey, that's a lie. I didn't flip anybody out of the chair. And right about that moment, the principal came poking her head out of the office. She called me inside, and something kind of funny happened. She said, her name is Principal Wells. Principal Wells said, I overheard a little bit of what was happening out there. She said, before we talk about anything else, what do you think you're here for? And I was frantic. I was like, that teacher keeps saying I flipped somebody's chair over or something, but I didn't do anything. And Miss Wells just kind of sat there for a second, and she had this thoughtful look on her face, and she said, I'll be right back. So she walked out the door, shut it behind her, and she was gone for, I don't know how long exactly, but as a second grader, anything more than 60 seconds feels like 4 hours. But when she finally came back, she said, okay, Ryan, you can go back to class. And I went back to class, and I went through the rest of the day, and then I came back the next morning, and there was a different son in the class. Surprise. I never saw that other one again. Now, probably most of us have never been falsely accused at throwing the bird up at a second grader. I hope. But I would be willing to bet that every single person in this room can relate to this at some level. Because at some point in our lives, I'd be willing to bet that every single one of us has been lied about. Right? At some point, every single one of us has been lied about. Like, have you ever had a coworker who threw you under the bus to try to advance their own career? Like a coworker who blamed you for something to try to keep themselves out of trouble. You ever had a classmate who blamed you for something they did so that they could get off scot-free? Ever been down that road? Here's another one. Ever had a family member who tried to turn the rest of the family against you so that they could get more out of the inheritance? So that they could come out better in the will? For the business owners out there, you ever had a competing business spread false rumors about your business so they could poach away your customers? Whatever the situation, every single one of us is going to go through some version of this. If you live long enough, at some point, someone is going to drag your name through the mud. Someone is going to slander you. Someone is going to make up stories about you to try to turn people against you. Sometimes people are going to lie to you, lie about you. And if it hasn't happened yet, it's going to happen in the future. Sometimes people are going to lie about you, slander you, drag their name through the mud, falsely accuse you. And we see a prime example of what that looks like as we continue in our Acts series this morning. Because our passage this morning is set into motion by a false accusation. Our passage this morning is set into motion by a slanderous attack on Paul by the Sanhedrin. Our story in the book of Acts this morning is set into motion when the Sanhedrin tries to drag Paul's name through the mud and turn the Roman government against him by hurling false accusations at him. Specifically, the Sanhedrin falsely accuses Paul of 3 crimes. 1, they falsely accuse him of stirring up unrest. 2, they falsely accuse him of instigating riots. And 3, they falsely accuse him of desecrating the temple. That makes 3 false accusations against Paul. And any one of those false accusations would be enough to ruin his life. But they're not content with just one. They have to pile the falsehoods on top of each other. And the lies, slander, false accusation, mudslinging, character assassination that Paul goes through in our passage this morning are universal struggles that everyone on planet Earth is going to have to go through, and that includes you and me, right? And because that is true, it forces us to ask a very important question. How do you deal with false accusations? How do you deal with slander? How do you respond when people lie about you? How do you respond when people drag your name through the mud, when people try to turn others against you by assassinating your character? How do you deal with false accusations in a way that honors Jesus, exalts Jesus, and imitates the example of Jesus? We're going to spend this morning diving deep into the question, how do you deal with false accusations? And as we open up our passage this morning, Paul answers that question more clearly than anywhere. Because what Paul does is he models 3 steps that you can take when people lie about you, slander you, drag your name through the mud, and hurl false accusations at you. And we're going to study those steps in depth, one by one, together this morning. So let's dive right in. Because the first step that Paul lays down for us this morning might seem a little bit obvious. It is not very sophisticated. It is not very deep. It is short and sweet and simple, but it's unbelievably important because the first step Paul lays down for us this morning is to fight false accusations with the truth. Like I said, pretty obvious, right? Before anything else, Paul says, fight false accusations with the truth. You know, the problem with falsehoods is that they eventually get exposed, right? Every falsehood eventually gets exposed. I love the way Jesus puts this in Luke chapter 8. He says, there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open. Do you hear that? He says everything that's currently hidden is gonna be uncovered. Everything you successfully kept a secret is gonna be made known. Everything you've successfully prevented from getting out is gonna get out sooner or later. The Lord is gonna rip the blanket off, and it's gonna be there exposed for everyone to see. The truth will come out, if not today, one day. If not in this life, in the next. If not here and now, at the very least, it'll come out in the final judgment at the resurrection. So, listen, whatever your secrets are, whatever the skeletons in your closet, whatever the thing that you try to hide, whatever falsehoods you've successfully spread about someone else, it is going to be exposed on the day of judgment, if not sooner. He says the truth will come out because the Lord will make the truth come out. And we see a prime example of what that looks like as we trek through our passage this morning. Because as Paul is standing here in front of Governor Felix, as he watches over his trial, the Lord causes the truth to come out as Paul debunks the Sanhedrin's false accusations, one point at a time. You know what I'm talking about? Paul debunks the Sanhedrin's false accusations one after another. The Sanhedrin falsely accused him of stirring up unrest, but Paul lays out clear proof that he didn't. The Sanhedrin falsely accused him of instigating riots, but Paul lays out clear proof that he didn't. The Sanhedrin falsely accuses him of desecrating the temple, but Paul lays out clear proof that he didn't. Paul debunks the Sanhedrin's false accusations one point at a time in the confidence that the Lord will make the truth come out in one way or another, either now or in the future. He's fighting these false accusations with the truth. And we can do the same. Because this is something we often forget. But when you are falsely accused, the truth is on your side. I'm going to repeat that real quick. When someone is spreading lies about you, the truth is on your side. When someone is falsely dragging your name through the mud, the truth is on your side. And that means that when you are falsely accused, the first thing you should do is do everything you can to make the truth known. Don't just sit there while false accusations spread. Don't just sit there and let those false accusations become the narrative. Don't just sit there and let those false accusations proliferate. No, you need to take those lies head on. You need to address those falsehoods directly. You need to get the truth out. You need to make the truth clearer and louder than the lies the other person is spreading about you. That is the first step Paul lays down for us this morning. Fight false accusations with the truth. But that is just the beginning. Because at exactly the same time, you have to deal with the flip side of that. Because even after you've done everything you can to fight the false accusations that have been hurled at you, you still have to accept that not everyone will believe you. Know what I'm talking about? No matter how clearly the truth is on your side, not every person is going to be on your side. Some people are just never going to believe you. And because that is true, Paul models a second and equally important step to take when someone is spreading lies about you. And that is accept that you can't win everyone over. I'm going to say that again. Learn to accept that you can't win over everyone. I'm going to say this one more time because we need to burn this into our memories this morning. Learn to accept that you can't win over everyone. The way that Luke tells our story this morning is sort of bitterly funny. It's kind of bitterly ironic because even though Paul does everything right, it doesn't actually help him with Felix. Did you notice that when Elise was reading earlier? Even though Paul dismantles the false accusations against him, Felix still doesn't release him. Even though Paul absolutely crushes the lies that the Sanhedrin is telling about him, Felix still holds him for 2 full years. Felix robs Paul of 2 years of his life based on accusations that he knows are probably nonsense, because for Felix, the truth doesn't matter. All that matters is what will work best for Felix. And so Felix hears the arguments. He sees that Paul is probably innocent, but he deprives Paul of his liberty anyway. Leaves Paul to rot on house arrest for 2 full years. Which is a really dark reminder of this really inconvenient reality. You can't win over everyone. Doesn't matter what you do, there are always going to be people who are against you, right? Doesn't matter how hard you try, there are going to be people who have made up their mind about you. It doesn't matter how far you bend over backwards, there are going to be people who are hell-bent on making you the bad guy, treating you like the villain. There are going to be people who have written you off once and for all. It's one of the unbelievably cruel facts of life that in our fallen world, we can't respond, or we can't control how people respond to us. We can't control how other people see us. We can't make people believe the truth instead of believing the lies. We can't force people to think what we want them to think. We can't reach into people's heads and turn a couple of switches and pull a couple levers so they see past the slander and the lies and the falsehoods that have been hurled at us. No, after you've done your best, all you can do is rest. I didn't actually mean to make that rhyme, but here we are. After you've done your best, all you can do is rest. All you can do is content yourself with the fact that some people are going to hear those lies and abandon you. Learn to be content with the fact that some people are going to see the truth, but abandon you anyway. Like when you are under attack by someone spreading lies about you, one of the first things that happens is that people just disappear. Right? And people you used to count on just vanish off the face of the earth. Ever had that happen? People you used to be cool with just stop talking to you. People start treating you differently. Coworkers that you used to joke around with just start treating you like a pariah, right? Neighbors you used to say hi to every morning as you got your mail, just start waiting until you're done and then coming out when you're gone. Family members you used to talk to on the phone every week start screening your calls. And when that happens, it's painful, right? It's excruciating. Being abandoned by the people that we cared about is one of the most gut-wrenching things that can ever happen to us, isn't it? And yet the surprising flip side to this is that if someone is willing to drop you that quickly, you're probably better off without them. If someone's willing to abandon you that hastily, you're probably not losing a person worth keeping. You're not losing a person worth holding on to. You're not losing someone worth mourning. When someone is willing to throw away your relationship with them on the basis of lies and slander and false accusations, losing them is probably a gift. It's what some folks call blessed subtraction. Ever heard that term before? I should have turned it into a bullet point. Hindsight 2020. They call that blessed subtraction. You are losing people who weren't worth your energy or your time or your devotion. And we see this principle playing out in real time in our passage this morning as Paul does everything he can to fight these false accusations with the truth, but the governor Felix wrongfully holds him in a Roman prison for 2 straight years. Anyway, that's the second step Paul models for us this morning. Accept that you can't win over everyone. But the second step leads us directly to the final step. Because as people start to abandon you because of the lies that someone else is spreading about you, it becomes all the more important to draw near to your community, right? Like when there's a malicious person who's made a mission to lie about you and drag your name through the mud and isolate you from everyone else by spreading falsehoods about you, you desperately need a community you can fall back on. You desperately need a support system you can rely on. You desperately need a tribe that you can count on. And so the third step that Paul models for us this morning is to lean on your friends to support you. Know what I'm talking about? Paul says to fight false accusations with the truth, but to accept that you can't win over everyone, and then lean on your actual friends to support you. That's the key thing that we have to understand this morning. When someone falsely accuses you, what are they trying to do to you? They're trying to isolate you, right? At the baseline level, that is what false accusations are about. When someone starts spreading lies about you, they're trying to isolate you. They're trying to make you alone. They're trying to deprive you of the basic comforts of community and friendship, because it is so much easier to take down one single sheep wandering in the pasture than it is to take down a sheep surrounded by the rest of its flock, right? Because that is true. When you're facing false accusations, the thing that you need more than anything else is a support system. And God has given us a support system for situations exactly like that. It's called friendship. You may or may not have ever thought of it this way, but God created friendship so that we can have a support system in difficult times. You ever thought about that before? God created friendship so that we could have a support system in difficult times. This is a running theme throughout the scriptures. Like, just listen to what God's word has to say about friendship. I'm going to read a handful of scriptures to you very quickly. Are you ready? Proverbs 17 says, "A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity." Proverbs 27 says, "The heartfelt counsel of a friend is as sweet as perfume and incense." Just a few verses over, it says, "An open rebuke is better than hidden love. Wounds from a sincere friend are better than many kisses from an enemy." Proverbs 18 says, "One who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother." And above all, Jesus summarizes everything God's word has to say about friendship in his farewell message to his disciples in John 15. On the night before he was crucified, Jesus gathered his disciples, who were his closest friends at the time, and he says, "Greater love has no one than this, that someone laid down his life for his friends." That's what God's word has to say about friendship. He says a true friend isn't just there to do something that we're both sort of interested in. A true friend isn't just there to hang out sometimes. No, a true friend is there for you. A true friend isn't just there for you when things are going well and you have something to offer them. A true friend is there for you when you're going through adversity, when things are hard for you, when you're not super fun to be around, when you have nothing to offer them. He says a true friend is there to counsel you. A true friend is there to advise you. A true friend is there to help you find your way through life. He's there to help you find your direction. He's there to help you work through the problems that you face. He says a true friend is not a yes man. You know what a yes man is? They don't just affirm everything you say. They don't just affirm all of your beliefs. They don't just affirm all of your attitudes. A true friend tells you the truth. A true friend tells you when they think you're making a potentially life-ruining mistake. You know what I'm talking about? A true friend says, you know, that guy who has 6 different kids from 7 different women somehow, and has a restraining order from all 7 of them on domestic violence charges and hasn't paid alimony ever, probably isn't the dude to roll the dice on. A true friend says, hey, I heard the way that you were talking to your wife the other day, and it honestly made me really uncomfortable how rough you were being with her. That is not okay, man. A true friend says, dude, I can't let you get behind the wheel of this car right now because you've had 11 beers. Let me drive you, please. A true friend is willing to risk you getting pissed off at them by telling you something important you don't want to hear sometimes. God's word says a true friend is more reliable than most family members. A true friend is someone you can count on more than you can count on most of your cousins. More than you can count on most of your siblings, probably. Maybe even more than your parents. He says a true friend lays down their life for you. And that means that a true friend will be there as your support system when you are falsely accused, dragged through the mud, lied about, and character assassinated. And we see a prime example of what this looks like right here in our passage this morning, as Paul relies on the support of his friends while he's imprisoned on false charges. Now, when Paul was wrongly imprisoned on false accusations for 2 full years in Rome, he was able to get through it because he could lean on his friends. See, in the Roman world, the government didn't provide anything for its prisoners. And I mean anything. They didn't provide food. They didn't provide water. No medical care. No clothes. No bathing. Nothing. And that means that if you wanted to survive in a Roman prison, you needed to have someone you could rely on to bring things to you. Either your family needed to bring you food, water, medicine, clothes, soap, or your friends. Now we know that most of Paul's family abandoned him after he became a follower of Jesus. So that pretty much just left who? His friends. Which means that Paul would not have survived his stay in Roman prison without his friends helping him through it. Paul survived this long stay on false charges only by the support of his friends. And in exactly the same way, when your name is being dragged through the mud and false accusations turn so many people against you, lean on the friends who stand by you. Lean on the friends who don't abandon you. Lean on the friends who don't disappear. Lean on the friends who don't cut you loose, because what just happened is that you found out who your true friends are. Even as fake friends abandon you because of the lies that have been hurled at you, pour yourself into the people who stay. Pour yourself into the people who believe you. Pour yourself into the people who care. Pour yourself into the people who devote themselves to you. Pour yourself into the people who willingly become your support system, even when you're ravaged by lies and slander and false accusations, and let them hold you up. That is the third step that Paul models for us this morning. Lean on your friends to support you. And because all of this is true, our application for this morning is unbelievably simple. Ask God to give you the strength to weather lies, slander, and false accusations without losing yourself or falling apart. Ask God to help you come to terms with the fact that sometimes people are going to lie about you. Ask Him to fortify you against the harsh reality that you are sometimes going to have your name dragged through the mud. Ask Him to strengthen you to fight back against it in a way that exalts Jesus. Ask Him to empower you to fight back with the truth, to make the truth about you clearer and louder than the lies. Ask Him to help you accept that when you can't win over everyone, even when you fight back with the truth. And ask Him to surround you with genuine friends that you can lean on when the lies and the slander are trying to isolate you. Ask God to give you the strength to weather lies, slander, and false accusations without losing yourself or falling apart, and then watch the way He transforms your life through it. Let's join together in prayer. Lord, because of your love for us, you were willing to leave behind your throne, come down to earth, live the life of a humble servant, and go through lies, slander, false accusations in order to save us. You spent your life on earth. You spent your earthly ministry having your name falsely dragged through the mud by the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Sanhedrin and so forth. You spent your days on earth going through exactly the same thing that we go through, but magnified by 1,000,000. And yet you are willing to go through all of that to save us. And now you stand alongside us. You strengthen us. You empower us. You fortify us. And you carry us through as we suffer through those same lies, slander, false accusations in this life, in this fallen world. And when we think about the way that you are carrying us through all of this, we cannot help but fall down and worship you. And so now be glorified in our grateful worship this morning. And all of God's people said, amen. If you would now stand as we respond in worship through song.